Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Common Sense with Dr. Ben Carson. I'm your host, Ben Carson. You know, we talk a lot about education on this podcast. It's so important. You know, if you get a good education, you get to write your own ticket. But we've seen so many instances where people are not getting good educations anymore. Witness the times when you see those man on the street interviews and they ask them simple questions like, who fought in the Revolutionary War? Who won the Civil War? What countries border the United States? People have no clue what you're talking about. And obviously, if people are not well educated, they're quite easy to manipulate. So this becomes an incredibly important topic. And, we're going to go really delve into it a little bit today. Not only how we teach, but what we teach. And Texas is one of the states that's been taking a big step toward ensuring that our students are accessing high quality instructional material. So today I'm very excited to welcome to the show Texas State Representative Brad Buckley to discuss some of the things Texas is doing. Brad has been an incredible force in the state of Texas in this area of advocating for quality education for our children. So welcome to the podcast, sir.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carson. It's an honor to be with you and your audience. And this is a subject matter that I'm very, very interested in. I'm very, very proud of some of the results we're seeing. And I look forward to sharing all this with your audience.
Great. Well, you represent House District 54 in Texas, which is the central part of Texas.
Yes, sir.
And you're the chairman of the House Public Education Committee.
Yes, sir.
So really, before we jump into some of the policy issues, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, your education, and what got you so interested in this issue?
Well, I grew up about 10 miles from where I sit here today on a little rural area called Youngsport in southwestern Bell County. My mother was a first grade teacher. My father worked civil service at Fort Hood, and it's now Fort Cavazos, and we ranched. My grandparents were both teachers. My grandfather was a math teacher and a football coach and athletic director, and my grandmother was a first grade teacher. And so I was raised right here in the Killeen area. I attended Killeen Public Schools. I went on from there to attend Texas A&M University and really to pursue my dream of becoming a veterinarian. Our neighbor where I grew up in the country was a veterinarian, and since I was 13 years old, I'd ride around with him on the weekends, opening the gates, and really just helping, cleaning stuff up, if you know what I mean. And it inspired me, and it's really all I ever wanted to do. But my mother, as a first grade teacher, was always such a staunch advocate for making sure kids learned, for not following sort of the status quo, but for pushing the envelope. She was known to go to a school board meeting or two, much against the advice of other folks, to say, we can do better for children. And served on the school board in Killeen back in the early 2000s, and really got to see things firsthand. And but I'm very concerned about academic achievement and really the pathway that our kids are on in Texas. And so that led me to the Texas legislature. And I'm so proud that the speaker appointed me chairman of public education so we can begin to move the ball on significant education reform.
And your wife is an educator too, is she not?
Yes, sir. She is the assistant superintendent for student services for Killeen ISD. We're both Killeen ISD graduates. We met in senior English. She's an Army brat, came here through the military, and we've been married, June 29th, it'll be 33 years. 3 kids, all public school grads.
Congratulations. You hung in there until the sandpaper got smooth.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you've had sort of a ground level view of the education system, as a member of the school board, a parent, the husband of a wife who's an educator. Can you give us sort of a summary of why you sponsored HB 1605. What were the issues that really drove you?
Dr. Carson, what we found when we looked across Texas is that too many classroom lessons lacked the rigor and critical thinking elements that tomorrow's leaders really need. We've spent so much time looping back, trying to catch kids up that, and I don't believe it's necessarily intentional, but I think we had found a spot where we'd fallen to a point where we've lowered the bar. And so when we started to recognize the anticipated learning loss from the COVID pandemic, we knew that there had to be a better way to help kids catch up. And what we found is that through high quality instructional materials and very intentional process in the classroom, you can make big gains, but you can also do so in a way that is good for teachers. And so when you have something that benefits student outcomes, that also teachers praise and are positive about, I knew we were on the right track. And so we began last session with a very big bill, HB 1605 that you referenced, that really is significant reform in the way curriculum is established, the way it's vetted, and ultimately the way it's delivered in Texas classrooms.
Now, did the COVID pandemic have something to do with the creation of this bill?
Yes, sir. We looked at implementing what we call HQIM, or high quality instructional materials, to try to close that gap. But what we found when doing so is that, this was a lot of our issues were already there pre-COVID. COVID sort of ripped the Band-Aid off and really made us take a hard look. And, I've always been very data driven. And if you look at the results, across the classroom or across Texas in classrooms for third grade reading and eighth grade reading, there's no way to say that was good enough. And, in Texas, we've enjoyed such prosperity, an environment where really anyone can really go out and improve their lives and do great things. But that Texas miracle that is often referred to will not last if we don't have a highly educated workforce.
Absolutely.
And so, we just began to dig into it and working with the Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath, we sort of found this pathway, and I believe we're on the right track.
Well, we've seen in recent years the inclusion of leftist ideology and progressive social policies in textbooks. What do you plan to do about that?
Yeah. That's exactly right. When you really take a deep dive into some of the materials that were being adopted, really since 2011 in Texas, the entire adoption process and the vetting of the materials was literally returned to local school districts. Some did very well in adopting materials. Others really took a leftist view of what those materials should cover. And what's even more important is that these materials did not cover a substantial portion of the standards that kids should be taught. So we were driving down pathways of indoctrination as opposed to driving down a pathway of true learning and critical thinking.
Right.
And so this bill returns that authority to the State Board of Education to vet the materials, for them to be included on the HQIM list. And but more importantly, it puts those elected officials on the state board back in the saddle, if you will, to evaluate the materials. It allows for public input from teachers, but most importantly, allows public input from parents.
That's so important because I've had a chance to see some of the materials in the libraries of middle schools in the state of Florida, and it was embarrassing. I mean, the stuff that they expose these kids to, wow. And I imagine that the oversight that you and the group exercise would prevent that kind of thing from happening.
Yes, we even passed a separate bill this session that basically creates library standards. I will tell you, I guess being a legislator and a father and a husband and running a veterinary practice, I saw a list of titles that came out that were in Texas libraries, and my first thought was that can't be. Well, then my
Yeah,
wife began to look around, and she came home one night and said, "You know what?
it
These
is.
are the titles." And we've given our schools now the authority. Part of the bill is in the courts, as you could imagine. The left is challenging some of it. I mean, these are not close calls. This is highly sexualized material that has no place in Texas public school libraries. It's not even close.
Well, as a neuroscientist, I am really shocked because we know that the human brain continues to develop until your mid to late 20s.
Yes, sir.
So, they're exposing children with immature brains to materials that will probably have a profound effect on them. And then, in addition to that, you have so many people trying to convince these young people that they may not actually be a girl or a boy. And can you imagine what effect that has on an immature brain that's suggestible and curious as opposed to a mature brain?
Oh, absolutely. We're grandparents now, and I have a 3.5 year old grandson, and he was at my house the other day, and he was stacking up all the pillows off the couch, and he told me he was a beaver building a dam, and and so how impressionable young children are, I think is lost, but I think it's intentional. I think the left understands that the ideology can be planted in the brain of a child very early, and then it begins to impact the decisions that they make in the future. And I think we're seeing some of that on college campuses today. And
Absolutely.
I think enough is enough. We need to make sure we protect children, and then we need to create an environment where they can learn, where they're challenged. The bar must be raised. And so I believe that our bill really does that. It protects children, and then it also raises the bar for more academic rigor.
And in so many places, there seems to be an intentional effort to exclude parents and to reduce the parental rights and increase the rights of the state. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think we saw districts that when the library books began to be challenged across the state, we saw school districts handle it very well, and I commend them. Because school board members, I mean, you get libraries that get, 10,000, a collection of 10,000 books. And, not every school board member knew every title. But once some districts went, they were very proactive. They removed the books, they took care of it. Others really balked. They created processes for parents that were really hard for parents to navigate. And it felt really intentional to sort of show the parent, listen, you're not in charge, we're in charge. But I'll tell you, Texas parents have stood up and they've said no. They are, they're alert to what could be in the schools now, and they're going to make sure. And toward that end, on all the materials, even the classroom materials that House Bill 1605 creates and allows, each one must have an easily accessible parent portal.
I
So a
saw
parent
that.
knows what's being taught in the classroom for suitability and age appropriateness, but also they can look in, Dr. Carson, and learn how to help their child at home. Parental empowerment is two-pronged to me. It's parental empowerment, but it's also parental responsibility. So let's
Right.
give them the tools to be responsible.
Well, being a parent these days is a major task. A lot of people like to say that everything is as it always has been, but I don't think that's true. The things that our young people are bombarded with these days are massive, and if they don't have the kind of parental support that is necessary, they're going to be swept away by the tide. And you made reference to what's going on the college campuses. I think it's a prime example when you've got young people marching and protesting in support of brutal terrorists, and they don't really even know what they're talking about, and yet they're willing to risk their academic careers and everything else to get behind a movement that would just as soon cut their heads off.
And I saw some of the man on the street interviews, and they couldn't find the Middle East with on a map. Yet there's the reflex, that didn't happen overnight to somehow assume that position that, and it really leads us from, I think, our K-12 system up to our higher education system, but what's really going on those campuses. And, but I can tell you that in the K-12 space, if we build and we help to educate kids that can think critically, they can enter higher education and challenge those views.
Right.
It hasn't been so long ago that we did that, and I'm really concerned as why kids don't do that today.
Well, the leftists use a tool very effectively, and that's intimidation. And people are afraid. People are afraid to speak up, not only in the classroom, but at the workplace, in any public setting. People are afraid. And that's antithetical to the foundings of our nation, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But it's very effective. And it's going to require a lot of people to be willing to stand up for what they believe in. That ultimately, I think, will be the salvation of our country. But it starts early on. It starts with the kind of foundation that a child has at home and in the school. The Texas Educational Agency recently released something known as the Open Education Resource. What exactly is that for our audience?
Yes, sir. It is a state-owned curriculum that our school districts can access via a portal. We provided money for them to print the materials. Everything's in PDF fashion. They can. There's even money to have it printed and bound for workbooks and teacher manuals and really online and really textbooks. I think one of the things that's misunderstood about this is that when people hear about OER, they think that we're giving students everything on a Chromebook and that it's some sort of technology-based platform. Really, the open means it's owned by someone else and free to others. And so, when I've seen the OER implemented in the classrooms, it is literally pen and paper, a great teacher standing before a class, delivering a lesson that's high quality, where the lesson has been designed, but the teacher still has the ability to bring their own expertise. Some teachers with 20 years of experience that just like a very accomplished physician like yourself, there's things you knew from experience that, you might deviate from the protocol a little bit because you knew what worked, right?
Right.
It's the same way. But more importantly, the young teacher that just really is trying to grow and trying to get a handle on how to reach students, the materials allow them to do so. And they told me, they said, you know what? I don't think I'd have come back for year 2 or year 3 if I hadn't had these instructional materials that allowed me to be successful. Because any professional wants to see a good outcome.
Absolutely.
I want to heal animals. You healed children all your life, all your professional career. Those outcomes are what drive you to want to get better. And so once we have good outcomes, we're going to see just the quality of teaching in our classrooms just skyrocket. I just know that's going to be the case.
For the sake of transparency, I should disclose that I'm on the advisory board for TEA. Honored to be associated with so many people who are working hard to bring high quality teaching material. And I can't emphasize it enough, because what Marxists do and have done traditionally before they take over a society is they dumb it down. They get people to the point where they're more or less sheeple, and they don't have any real knowledge. And you can tell them anything you want. You can say, just as an example, the southern border is completely controlled. There's no problem there, even though there may be millions of people coming across who are undocumented. And they'll say, well, they said that's what they said, so it must be true. We have to create an educational system that encourages people to question things and to verify things. And you use the term evidence-based learning. What do you mean by that?
That's to look at practices and curricular content that is proven to get the outcome that you desire. Let's take the science of reading, for instance. We know that the brain learns to read in a certain way, and it's important that we make sure that our classroom teachers are trained to that. In Texas, we've had a huge effort to do so, but they need the materials that support that. And so, with high quality instructional materials, the English language arts or reading instruction is highly intentional to be based on decoding and then knowledge coherent sequences. So the key to understanding, you need the decoding, which is phonics, basically, to sound a word out, to blend the sounds together. But then so many of our kids lack the knowledge base. You could have a passage about, going to the beach and use vocabulary words about the beach. If you've never been to the beach, it's hard to really put that in your brain. So there has to be instruction all the way around that. And so these materials do that. They're real intentional on how they do it. And our piloted programs, the reading scores are soaring. They're double-digit gains in most places. And it's amongst the kids that need it the most. Those that are the furthest behind, that really are at risk of being left behind. And we're starting to see that turn around with evidence-based practices.
But a lot of teachers in their courses don't learn that type of methodology. They use like the 3 cueing method that really doesn't take advantage of what you just talked about, the way that the brain actually learns. And I hope that the efforts that are being put forth in Texas will give the teachers a little more leeway in terms of how to use evidence in the whole process. But one of the other big problems, across the nation has been teacher unions, which have been infiltrated by a lot of people with leftist thinking. And they create teaching programs that you have to teach. And it sort of stifles your own creativity. I think the system that you're working on with 1605 leaves room for creativity on behalf of the teachers. And that's the reason that some people go into teaching. They're very enthusiastic. They've learned how to transmit information to other people in an effective way. And then they're stifled and they're told, no, you can't do it this way. You have to do it this way. And I think that's why we see so many early retirements in the teaching profession.
Yes, sir. We've had a typical response from teacher unions about this curriculum is they tend to project what they want, whatever they really believe, they project onto you. And they've said, teachers aren't robots and kids aren't widgets. Well, this is the furthest thing from that. This allows for each individual educator's own creativity and their own judgment on how to reach kids. However, it provides a good protocol to follow, one that years of experience you build upon and can then make sure you're impacting kids in a positive way. And what I've seen, I've visited many classrooms that implement this material. And what you see is when you challenge kids, behavior problems go down. There is a collective sense of togetherness among the kids, where you'll see a child that's reading very well slide over next to a child that's struggling and offer to help. There's not a snicker. There's not a slide remark. It really is kind of this competition, if you will, where kids get in the room and they want that classroom to be a team and they want to lift the students up. And so it shows us that expecting more from children is what we need. Where, teacher unions, they'll testify before our committees and they'll go 6 hours and never mention a child. And so it's always about the adults. But the adults that have implemented this material understand how well it works and they still have the freedom to bring their creativity and their professional judgment. As a professional, they need to bring their professional judgment to the table, and they can do so with these materials.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that Marxist ideology is very committed to excluding any reference to religion. And I think in this material that we're talking about, there is some inclusion of religion. What am I correct in that?
Yes, you're correct. The reading passages are intentionally placed there to provide context. And if you really look at the founding of our country, and you look at building cultural literacy amongst the next generation, you cannot separate the religious underpinnings of many different religions and the impact. Historic figures in their great works, their great oratory works, reference biblical and other religious, whether it be scripture or other writings, and somehow excluding that really prevents someone from understanding the real essence of what that historical figure that created such great change in our country and world, what they were referencing. It would be like teaching a course in cardiology, but say, yeah, we're not going to talk about the heart. And so it really breathes the lifeblood, if you will, into the content to create a real knowledge base, a classical context of really what our kids should know, and it really sort of begins to launch launches a child towards being a real critical thinker.
Yeah, I mean, how can you even talk about the Dark Ages without reference to religion? That's what caused the whole thing.
Yeah.
And how can you talk about the United States of America, whose founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says that our rights come from our Creator, aka God? And how can you tell children, we can't talk about that when every coin in their pocket and every bill in their wallet says, "In God we trust"? What are we talking about? It's so schizophrenic.
It really is. And the school superintendents, it's been interesting. It's been some of the smaller districts, the little rural districts around Texas, that have really been the first to sort of, inquire about this. And we've had a couple of meetings with them. And, it really is not only the evidence-based strategies that are in the lessons, but it is this classical content that they feel like just marries so well with their communities. And, I think in a time when we know that parents need every tool in the toolbox, they are in charge of their kids' education. Our public schools in Texas need this content. They need this curriculum so that they can show parents that they understand that their values, and they understand the parents' desire to have their child receive a total education that's rigorous, that challenges them, but that has great outcomes, so that child can be successful.
What are the funding mechanisms for this legislation?
Well, we're really, really pleased to be able to put a appropriation of over $500 million into this program. One, to make sure that we could get the content created, but then we could also help offset the cost of implementation for our school districts. We wanted to lower the burden to adopt it, and we do so in a very robust way. I know next session there was already talk amongst members. This has been an extremely popular rollout. I had nearly 60 of my colleagues join me in a letter to TexS parents the other day, just sort of describing what it is and asking parents to be a part of the instructional material review process. I
know one of the schools is in your district.
Yes.
Have you heard from them?
Oh, absolutely. Double-digit gains. We have teachers that are just so excited about the process. They started the pilot as purely voluntary, and Dr. Ott, the superintendent of Temple ISD, said, "You can jump in the pool It's told his campus principal, you can jump in the pool, you can stick your toe in the water, or you can stay on the bank. We had 3 campuses jump in the pool. And once other campuses started to see the success and teachers began to talk with each other, every campus adopted it
Wow.
at this point. Because they understand is professionals want good outcomes. They want to be good at what they're doing, but they need the tools to do it. And that's what this supplies. And, the data is beginning to speak for itself. And, that's what gets me is those that oppose it will look at the gains, will look at children learning more, and then question everything around it as if that didn't occur. My job, I feel like, is to make sure we put in place a way where kids learn more. You can't say we're learning enough now. You can't look at the way we're going and say that's good enough. I can't. And so, we're getting the improved outcomes. We have to continue to do this. And I'm just sort of baffled by the pushback when it's right there, in the spreadsheet of how kids are learning more and teachers are more satisfied.
It is baffling. I'm sure that comes to some degree from your scientific training as a veterinarian. You're used to evidence. You do things based on evidence, not on ideology.
That's right.
Otherwise, all your patients would die.
Yeah, exactly. And I was telling someone the other day, and they said, well, this is different than what we're doing. I said, there's some things that I learned in veterinary school 30 years ago that if I went and did it today, it'd be malpractice. Yeah. Things have changed. New learning, new technology, new evidence-based practices that I need to uphold as a professional. That's all we're asking school districts to do here. Is that right there?
Well, you talked a little bit earlier about rigor in these materials. What were you referring to? Are you saying that the teaching that's done previously has not been rigorous?
Yeah, we looked at a study of the lessons that were presented, that were taught, if you will, in TexS classrooms, and only about 19% of them were said to be on grade level. And so, we kept hearing that the STAR test, which is our state test, our summative test to see where our kids are that we give every year, we kept saying, well, it's too hard. The kids aren't learning. It's way too hard. Well, it turns out we weren't matching the rigor of the standards. And for some curriculum, Dr. Carson, they weren't even teaching but 50% of the standards. But you're tested over all the standards. I mean, it again, this whole since 2011, it's sort of the wheels came off, and so we're approving standards, but we're not. Not every district had the ability to kind of put together a hodgepodge of curricula that would sort of match those standards. Some did a great job, but others, it's like anything else. There's 1,100 school districts. They couldn't all do it in the same way. And this sort of really helps them, and they'll have a list of materials they know will match those standards.
Some of the things that are going on in public schools are very distressing. And recently, Governor Abbott said he had the votes to pass school choice voucher program. Is that true? And is that good or bad?
I think it's very true. I think the results of these latest primaries and primary runoffs show that that parents want every tool in the toolbox. I live in a little community outside of Killeen that's sort of known for a great public school system, and every parent I meet says, I'm pretty satisfied with my public school, but they're my kids, and I want every tool in the toolbox. We have a campus not far from my clinic here in Killeen that teaches kids with special needs, especially autism. Many of the kids have tried public school. We've got families there, Dr. Carson, where moms and dads are working 2 jobs to pay tuition, to send them in an environment where their kids are learning. Yes. And their kids feel valued, and they have the kind of one-on-one, interaction they need. Some of the pushback against especially special education kids and private schools is that they don't have to provide these federal protections. I'd argue that the lack of federal protections is making our private schools more effective in terms of the fact that the regulation that the federal government puts on our schools and special education has our teachers documenting more than they're teaching. They have to, document 19 things a day, and it keeps that interaction, stifled between teacher and student. And so there's a path forward, and I believe that school choice is going to pass next session. And I think we're going to have a great program in Texas, where we have great public schools. We'll support and improve our public schools, but we'll also create a pathway for a parent to have the ultimate control of how their kids are educated.
I was talking to a 12-year-old yesterday, and she was talking about how they had to keep their mouth shut in school because the next day was going to be Gay Pride Day. And if you didn't believe in it and didn't get behind it, and if you didn't use the right pronoun, that you could actually be expelled. And I think those are the kinds of things that are really driving the school choice initiative and the homeschooling initiatives as well.
Yeah, I know, like I said before, I have two grandkids. My oldest grandson is 3.5, and I know my daughter and her husband are just so concerned about the future of their children, my grandchildren. And that's really what has sort of driven me, is that, when we have pivoted so far away from our academic pursuits into really sort of a social engineering and a leftist agenda in a classroom, then I'm just a big no on that. We need to make sure that our kids are learning to be productive citizens. And we need to stay in the lane of educating and stay out of the indoctrination business. And, parents can do what they at home, they can provide whatever access to the materials they want for their children. But our schools really have no business in that lane.
One of the things that was noted by de Tocqueville when he came to study America in 1831 was how strong our educational system was, and how he could find a mountain man, and the guy could read, and the guy could tell him about our founding documents. And you just didn't find things like that in other countries. And yet we've allowed things to deteriorate to a significant degree. There are a lot of good teachers out there, and many of them feel trapped in the system. And we want to encourage them also. But I want to give Representative Buckley the last word here. What would you say to those teachers and to our audience in general?
Well, to the classroom teachers in Texas and those in our public schools, we appreciate what you do. My family has been in public education all my life. And I know personally so many public school teachers that go to work every day, and they do the very best they can for their kids, and they have made a huge impact in the lives of children. And my goal is to continue to allow them to do that. But they'll tell me privately that things are not like they used to be. And so as long as I have a say in it and I can advocate for it, I want to bring back an environment where teachers can teach content at a high level, rigorous content, and content that understands how exceptional we are as a country. The fact that, sometimes those with the least as a child through education can go to achieve the greatest things, can make transformational change in the lives of everyone through their innovation and entrepreneurship, their abilities in science, in medicine, in the arts. It's all there. That is our tradition as a country. And for some reason, we have pitted ourselves against each other instead of providing that runway for our kids to go be great. It's in them. It is in our children. And our education system it exists to produce and encourage that. We're not educating activists. we're not educating those that feel like we live in the world of the oppressor and the oppressed. We are giving children the tools to go out and to defy every odd in their life. And I hope we can continue to create an environment where we can do that, because the future of our country, quite frankly, depends on it.
Amen. You have said a mouthful right there. And thank you for being an example of something we talk about all the time, and that is citizen advocates. You know, that's what our system was built around, the people, of, by, and for the people. And individuals like yourself who are actually willing to go out and roll up their sleeves and improve society for their fellow Americans. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Please keep up the wonderful work in Texas.
Well, Dr. Carson, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you and speak to your wonderful audience. And thanks for all you have done and continue to do for America. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Representative Brad Buckley about the importance of education. We write our own ticket when we have a good education in this country, and yet we're seeing education fall by the wayside. We're seeing school systems where no one in the whole system is competent at grade level in math, where reading scores are declining dramatically. All of that is important because, the world is shrinking in the sense that we're all interconnected. We have to compete against people in other nations. We're not going to be able to do that effectively if our educational facilities are oriented towards social things as opposed to factual things. Children need to come out of the school and be educated about things that will make them successful in life. So we have a chore on our hands. At American Cornerstone, we have the Little Patriots program, specifically oriented toward K through 5. And it teaches the children the values that made us into a great country. Teaches them about our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But of course, there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. But the whole gamut, what they need to know to be successful. Check it out, littlepatriotslearning.com, or you can find it at the ACI website, americancornerstone.org. And that's it for this week. Make sure you subscribe for free, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You don't have to miss any of them. And our cartoon series, Star Spangled Adventures, you can get that in lots of different places now, including Fire Stick. And you can actually get it on YouTube. Just look it up under American Cornerstone Institute, or under the Little Patriots program, or under Star Spangled Adventures. And remember the cornerstone principles: faith, liberty, community, and life. We'll see you next week.